One.
Hi, and welcome to PC Politics. I'm your host, Phyllis Coley, CEO and publisher of Spectacular Magazine. PC Politics deals with candidates, politicians, but more importantly, issues. Today, we are going to talk about SROs and the student resource officers and what's happening in our schools with these officers. Leading the charge to make people aware of this situation, and who has also been organizing some of the marches dealing with the death of George Floyd, is my guest today, Miss Aissa Dearing.
Hi,
Thank you for being here today and taking the time to talk to us, because I know you're in the midst of planning an event for June the 13th.
Yes, ma'am.
So first of all, let's tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, I'm a recent graduate of JDC Early College High School, which is on the campus of the illustrious North Carolina Central University. I'm a Durham native, and I'm planning to transfer to Howard University to study history and environmental science.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Now, you were born and raised here?
Yes, ma'am. All 18 years.
Okay, so first of all, let's talk about the Candlelight Vigil that you organized. Well, first of all, it's not just you. Let's talk about the team that you're working with.
Yeah, so Elijah King and I, it's a partnership that we kind of formed in founding another initiative called the Durham Youth Climate Justice Initiative, but we decided to host a Candlelight Vigil because we wanted a space to heal for the Durham community, to let out some of the confusion, anger, frustration, sadness, give a space for people to feel all of those emotions and be vulnerable.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. And so about how many people did you have attending?
We had about 500 to 600 people.
Because that was in the CCB Plaza downtown.
Yeah.
Now you are planning on this march that's called a March for Black Students.
Yes, ma'am.
On June the 13th. Why are you doing this?
Well, a lot of Durham natives and Durham community residents don't really know of the issue around school resource officers. Some don't even know that racism is prevalent in Durham. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to shine light on an issue that affects Black students and how we can tangibly say that Black lives matter in Durham. And this march is the way to exemplify that.
How are SROs or student resource officers affecting students in schools?
Well, they act as police. They disproportionately target students of color, and they help make discipline decisions that school administrators, teachers, mental health professionals are more qualified to make. They help to divert students into teen court or misdemeanor diversion programs, sometimes even juvenile court, which takes them away from the classroom.
So, are they the ones that then put the students into detention?
They have the capacity to arrest students and sometimes even sit in on making the decisions around whether or not students should be put in in-school suspension or out-of-school suspension, which has been known as a horrible tactic of trying to punish and remediate students.
Is there any consideration when these things happen with students who are children,
right,
under the ages of 18? Are the parents called?
The parents are notified, but again, even the traumatic experience of possibly being handcuffed or placed on a parole car and taken downtown.
Just that embarrassment.
That's embarrassing, and that has traumatic effects on the student.
Mm-hmm. And who gives them this authority?
It's the Board of Education in their
the Durham Public Schools Board of Education, okay?
Yes, ma'am, and the school administrators. They essentially determine what role school resource officers play in schools. And some, they act solely as security, and others, they sit in the rooms with the students, actively making decisions on what their discipline measure should be. And this inconsistency is what I'm concerned about.
Is there a guidance counselor or a mental health person or anything brought in to weigh in on these decisions?
Sometimes, but most often times not. There's only a couple of guidance counselors allocated to schools that have hundreds of students. So oftentimes they don't have the time to help make some of these decisions that I know would benefit students.
So what are you asking the Board of Education to do?
I'm asking them to terminate their memorandum of understanding with the Durham County Sheriff's Department, which allocates the SROs. And I'm asking them to use that money to instead fund school nurses, school psychologists, therapists, guidance counselors, things that we need and I know will make schools safe.
So pretty much the same thing that with the larger the marches and the protests as a result of George Floyd, even with my understanding is even when people are saying defund the police, they're not really saying abolish the police department. We're just saying use some of those resources, allocate them in different ways.
Exactly. It's more of a community-led safety effort. We're not saying, to use your example, to defund the police. We're not saying snap, buy police, right?
Yeah.
We're saying, how about let's use some of that money that we put towards police and their trainings, which we know aren't working, and instead use them in school social workers or more job opportunities for students or more substance abuse specialists for students who may feel the need to engage in those kinds of activities.
Have you had my understanding and that you wrote a letter to the Board of Education and to the sheriff?
The chair of the Board of Education, Mike Lee, and Superintendent Mubenga.
Have you gotten a response?
Technically, yes. It was a public issued response from their last work session. Chairman Mike Lee said he would not be removing school resource officers from their post.
So he said this at the meeting.
He said this at the meeting, but he
has not. But you took the time to write him a letter.
Yes, ma'am.
But they did not take the time or have the time to reply to you.
A couple of the school board members reached out and said they would be willing to have a conversation. That's member Minnie Fort Brown, Natalie Beyer, and Bettina Umstead. Nothing from who I addressed the letter to, the chairman of the board, or Pascal Mubenga, the superintendent
of schools. So talk about this march on June the 13th.
They said they're responding to their stakeholders and concerned for their safety and security. And that's
who are their stakeholders?
Exactly. That's what I'm wondering too.
So that would the stakeholders not be the students?
I would consider our primary stakeholders to be our students and teachers. And that's who signed the petition that I wrote over 3,000 times. I'm assuming that he's talking about some school administrators and principals that have vocalized that they would be more comfortable with school resource officers present.
Have they addressed what we were just talking about of not taking them out of the schools, but reallocating resources and using them in a different way?
They have not. They have not reached out to me directly to have a conversation.
Okay, so what time is the march? Where does it start?
Sure. It's going to be at 511 Cleveland Street, which is the central office of Durham Public Schools, and it's going to start at 6 p.m. And we're going to march all the way to the Durham County Jail.
Okay, and then there will you have a rally?
We will have a short rally to begin with and a short rally to end. It's going to be made up of students of color speaking on their experiences with school resource officers and teachers of color who want to voice their opinions on the issue as well.
And before we go, could you give me like one example of a student resource officer that you felt like really overstepped their bounds?
Well, I can think of multiple times actually. I remember I was at this football game one time and a couple of students were arguing about something and it looked like things were about to escalate, but an SRO stepped in and almost ambushed one of the students and handcuffed him on the ground, and I watched the student have to be escorted out by a school resource officer at a football game. Yeah.
Okay, so no conversation. No. Okay, all right. Well, and then what's the next step after the march?
Well, I definitely am waiting to see Durham Public Schools' response to the march. We're also thinking of holding a summit for just young people to talk about reimagining what safety looks like. So if young people are open to having school resource officers completely removed from schools, having a replacement plan and ensuring that their input is in that plan. That's our next step.
And would you like to also perhaps have some type of process before people are just handcuffed and taken out of the school?
100%. I think mental health professionals are way more qualified to de-escalate situations like that. I've heard of a lot of concerns about how maybe students are bigger than the teachers, and if a fight like the one I was just talking about was breaking out, then teachers or trained professionals couldn't break up that fight, but school resource officers could, and I don't think that's true. I think social workers, like my mom, are trained in helping to de-escalate situations, sometimes even physically putting their body on the line to help students. And I'd like to see this happen.
And I don't want to leave with the impression that all SRO officers are terrible people.
Yeah.
Because we talked about you've had relationships. A lot of the SRO in schools have relationships with the students.
Exactly, and it's a legitimate concern when students are saying, well, I have a positive relationship with my school resource officer and I don't want to see them leave. I completely understand that, but I honestly think that a better relationship could be made with any mental health professional that's on the staff rather than a relationship with a person in law enforcement.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Aissa, for what you're doing for our community. And
Wait, pause. Do that thing one more time. Ready?
I don't know if he's passed.
No, you're good. Ready? Go.
Thank you so much for all that you're doing for Durham, what you're doing for our community. And when I say our community, that does not mean your next door neighbor. I mean the overall bigger community. And thank you so much for all that you're doing. And I wish you luck at Howard.
Thank you.
Kind of wish you'd stayed at North Carolina Central, but hey,
Yeah.
that ship has sailed. But that's okay. If you don't like it in Washington, please come back.
I can always come back.
That's right.
Exactly.
Always come back. But thank you.
Thank you for having me.
So I have been visiting with Aissa Dearing, who is one of the organizers of the March for Black Students. It's taking place on June the 13th at 6 o'clock. That will start at the Durham Public Schools Central Office, which is at 511 Cleveland Street. If you'd like more information, you can go to our website, spectacularmag.com. And until next time, see ya.
All right.